to all of these countries. We're helping farmers in foreign countries, but we can't help United States citizens and the American farmers right here. The last thing we should be doing is letting China and Bill Gates buy up America's farmland, running up prices to 11 to 15 and almost $20,000 an acre right here. And we're facing a food shortage in this country where the American consumer is going to pay the high cost of food in the coming months in their local grocery store. So if you haven't been to the grocery store lately, I challenge you to go and look at the high cost of food. And it's because we're not investing in America's farmers, and we're not putting more small-scale farmers into business. And these are things that we should be talking about in this country. And I invite other candidates that are looking to seek office, that people like myself, we're looking for a new direction in this country because we're not getting the help that we need, and they're not answering the pleas and the cries of the American farmer in this country.
Describe a Raven Rock to me, like what it is, what it's for.
No.
Raven Rock, like Area 51, remains one of the U.S. government's most classified installations. It's all part of a plan that was hatched 70 years ago.
In the 1950s, the government came up with plans for a deep underground command center where the president and, a few hundred staff members not only could take shelter, but also could direct a nuclear war.
The plan is called Continuity of Government, or COG.
At any moment, we could see thousands of members of the government completely wiped out, but there's a secondary government, a shadow government that is ready to take over at a moment's notice.
Raven Rock is an underground backup Pentagon.
It's the most unbelievable place you can imagine. You're 768 feet below the surface.
Don Camel spent 3.5 years at Raven Rock as part of the president's communication team. He's never spoken on camera before about his time working in the secret bunker.
Basically, they carved out a city underground that could survive a direct hit from a nuclear blast. After you go through the security, you walk in and it's basically an underground tunnel. There's a glass door that was 3.5 foot thick that weighed 30 tons. You go through like an airlock, and they had 2 of those doors, and then you walk another half a mile.
A half mile deeper into the mountain is the bunker itself.
And you're going past 5 buildings. Those represent the 5 rings of the Pentagon. And each of those buildings are 3 stories tall, and they probably have 50 to 80 offices per floor.
The buildings are mounted on springs to survive the shock waves from a nuclear blast.
There's a common cafeteria capable of serving 3,000 people 3 meals a day for 30 days on lockdown. They had a barber shop in there with 1 chair.
It's got massive reservoirs, generators, even a crematorium if needed, post office, medical facilities, and emergency command and communication links to the U.S. military all around the world.
As part of the White House team, Camel had access to the most restricted part of the bunker. The presidential suite.
The presidential suite is a very secure area. The other people in the site, they had no access, and they were very, very curious as far as what was behind the door. The presidential bedroom was, of course, a king-size bed. Then there was a separate kitchen set up in our suite to feed 30 or 40 people. The presidential office overlooked the war room, which had the same display that was a duplicate of what they had in the Pentagon. We would look down, and of course they'd look up, and they couldn't see through the glass because it was a one-way glass.
To understand why these bunkers were created, you have to rewind to the 1950s. For some, it was America's golden age. But it was also the dawn of a ruthless fight for global supremacy.
The United States and the Soviet Union stand on the verge of direct military confrontation,
in which both sides built up an arsenal of spectacularly powerful weapons that meant the next World War would not last years, but minutes.
There might be as little as 15 minutes notice of an attack that could wipe out much of civilization as we know it. And so the Eisenhower administration began an elaborate process of contingency planning. And if we only had a few minutes, then they didn't want to have any sort of layers of review or approval that would slow down the process of responding to a major emergency.
To avoid mass panic, the U.S. government had created a nationwide civil defense program.
We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous. If it may be used against us, we must get ready for it.
Growing up in the 1950s, there were fallout shelters, places where you would go if the nuclear war occurred. And in those fallout shelters, there was water, there were prescription drugs. And the notion really was that you could go there and survive.
The government starts telling Americans that not only can they survive a nuclear war, but they could go on living their lives as long as they come together in an unquestioning mass.
Not intelligent. This family knows that even a thin cloth helps protect them. Even a newspaper can save you from a bad burn.
But while the public was being told to build shelters and duck under their desks, the government elite were going to hide under tons of rock and reinforced concrete.
There was an awareness at the highest level of the American government that these civil defense drills were really window dressing. This was a massive, massive propaganda effort that bore almost no relationship to reality whatsoever. President Eisenhower knew that this was all bull. He said things like, if nuclear war comes, there aren't going to be enough bulldozers to scrape the bodies off the streets.
You are entering one of the most secret places on Earth. It's a bunker built into a hollowed-out mountain in Colorado. It's just one of the top secret shelters where 7,000 Americans will go to in the event of nuclear annihilation.
The government built more than 100 of these bunkers and relocation facilities around the country.
There's no room for families. Wives and children not included.
The plans to get a small number of government officials out of Washington, out of major cities, and into these bunkers around the country. And it doesn't include families.
Gary Graff is the author of the new book, Raven Rock, the U.S. government's secret plan to save itself while the rest of us die. The title comes from this place, Raven Rock Mountain, a super secret bunker in Pennsylvania where Pentagon brass will relocate in a nuclear war. How do you get on this list? And who's on it?
Well, so the list includes your high-ranking government officials, your cabinet leaders, your congressional leadership, members of the Supreme Court, as well as, top aides, White House staff.
Some people are on the elite list by accident. The bunker at Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado has its own Subway sandwich shop.
If you just happen at the time of the apocalypse to be the person manning the cash register at the subway, you're going to be the only fast food employee in America who survives the nuclear war.
Another bunker is buried in Virginia at a place called Mount Weather. This is the Mount Weather facility about 60 miles west of Washington, D.C. And it looks like a typical secure government facility. It is surrounded by a chain link fence with a barbed wire at the top, and they don't like visitors.
Okay. I need y'all to move on.
For decades, another secret bunker was located beneath Greenbrier, a luxury resort in West Virginia. It's now a museum. Behind this 25-ton blast door was a shelter for 400 government officials who could live for 60 days in dorms like this one. The bunker system has been used only once, on 9/11.
On 9/11, helicopters swooped in here to the Capitol and evacuated the congressional leadership as well as officials from across Washington out into these mountain bunkers around the country.
Let's hope they're never needed again.
We interrupt this program. This is a national emergency. Important instructions will follow. The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States government. This is not a test. A nuclear attack was commenced against the United States. 15 nuclear bombs have detonated in several areas across the country. They include Baltimore, Boston, Chicago, Denver, Detroit, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, New York, Pennsylvania, Portland, Maine, Portland, Oregon, San Francisco, San Diego, Seattle, and Washington, D.C. At this time, all residents within a 400-mile radius of these areas should seek a fallout shelter. Fallout is a product of nuclear attacks. Prolonged exposure to fallout will result in certain death. If there is a nearby location that has been designated as a fallout shelter, go there now. Otherwise, seek shelter in the interior part of a strong building on the lowest floor. Make sure you have food, water, and a battery-powered radio with you. Do not exit the fallout shelter until the all clear has been given. Tune to a station that is serving your area for more information. The President will be speaking on all stations shortly. Stand by for this message. This is an emergency action notification. All broadcast and cable systems shall transmit this emergency action notification message. This station has interrupted its regular program at the request of the White House to participate in the emergency alert system. During this emergency, most stations will remain on the air, providing news and information to the public in assigned areas. This is WPIX.
than 1,500 sailors are now out of a job over their refusal to get the COVID-19 vaccination. According to newly published data on the Navy's website, the service has separated nearly 1,200 active duty personnel and more than 300 reservists. The law firm representing 35 Navy SEALs has now had its case expanded to include all 4,200 Navy service members seeking a religious accommodation. Lawyer Mike Berry says kicking out sailors over COVID vaccine refusal is harming military readiness.
You know, recruiting and retention are at an all-time low. Morale is at an all-time low. And the harm to our national security cannot be overstated.
The Navy says 47 sailors have gotten approved religious accommodations. More than 6,300 active and reserve sailors remain unvaccinated. 17 Navy military members have died from COVID.
Undocumented workers in essential jobs. Paul Solomon explores what's at stake for his latest report from Making Sense.
In affluent Mount Kisco, a New York City suburb, undocumented immigrants for hire. At the train station, at Henry's Deli, and at Neighbors Link, a nonprofit that serves the newly arrived. They line up at 7. Contractors, even just homeowners like Tony Archie, soon follow.
Trees came down on my property, so I want to move the firewood from one side of the house to the other.
And he's spreading mulch, a 2-person job for which only 1 worker was available.
He's 17 hours today.
How many hours is he going to work? ¿Cuántos horas?
In the end, no deal. Pool company owner Chris Carthy also out of luck.
There's a labor shortage across the country.
Even at Neighbors Link?
I come here every blue moon to pick up those extra few hands for excavation, and we can't get anyone.
And so the nub of the economic argument for letting some 11 million undocumented immigrants already in the U.S. remain legally.
So let's just be clear that immigrants are coming to this country because of our thirst for this workforce.
Carola Bracco runs Neighbors Link.
They are taking on jobs that often complement the workforce that was born in this country because of the fact that they're willing to do these jobs.
Jobs in agriculture, construction, landscaping, cleaning, and who's bussing tables at restaurants, washing dishes, cooking.
This is the apron with the logo.
This man, whom we've decided not to name, has worked in restaurants for 20 years since slipping across the desert from Mexico.
A couple restaurants in Manhattan. Also, I used to work in the airport, JFK.
Catering for American Airlines. In 2008, he moved up to Trump National Westchester Golf Club.
Were there many other undocumented people in the club?
A lot. I would say 30% of the employees, maybe more. In the grounds, kitchen, waste staff, maintenance, we're pretty much all over the club, illegal people.
Did people know that you were undocumented? The people who hired you?
Yeah, they know.
How do you know they know?
This is the card that I told me that it's too fake for accepted.
How could they not have known, he says, given that they noted the obvious inauthenticity of his ID?
So I gotta get another one. I gotta spend another $45.
Both bought on the street from people hawking fake IDs.
All you have to give is the picture, and they do the rest.
Now, this man lost his job at Trump National Westchester in 2019 after news reports that the club had hired undocumented immigrants. At the time, Eric Trump said the company planned to check workers' status in the future. But in his decade at the club, this worker had risen to banquet chef, selfieing with the likes of baseball legends Pedro Martinez and Mariano Rivera, and earning as much as $70,000 a year between the club and odd winter jobs.
Couldn't they have found citizens to work for that kind of money?
I guess no, because it was days that I started 6 in the morning and I was in the club until like midnight, nonstop. So I guess not everybody do that. And sometimes I was mad, of course, because this is too much. But at the same time, I feel like I got my hands tied. If I say something, they might fire me, they might say something, to the authorities, ICE in this case.
Because you're always at risk, yes?
Yes. We are in risk every day.
So, economic argument number one. The undocumented do jobs nobody else will. Okay, another point. Somewhere between 50 and 75% of undocumented workers pay taxes, says the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office.
I got all the taxes that I've been paying since I'm in this country, since 2002 until 2020. I got to pay taxes like a normal person, like a person with documents.
So they contribute to the economy in production and in taxes, which pay for benefits that the undocumented can't always use.
Medicare, Section 8, they don't qualify for food stamps, a whole variety of services that they don't qualify for.
Undocumented immigrants provide yet another economic advantage for those worried about Social Security's finances.
So you paid Social Security?
Yes, every single year since day one.
Will you get Social Security when you get older?
I don't think so because, no documents, no Social Security.
There is a large fund that the Social Security Administration has that are benefits that will never be paid out to the people that paid the funds in.
So that's pretty much the case for legalizing the undocumented. The case against?
Illegal immigrants clearly cost taxpayers far more in benefits than they pay in taxes.
Isn't it time for Washington to prioritize the American people?
Dan Stein, who runs the Federation for American Immigration Reform, insists that the undocumented do not pay for themselves when you consider, for example,
the social safety net, the cost of the social safety net, education, public schooling.
Worse still, he says, they drive down wages.
The percent of Americans in the labor force is at an all-time low. One of the reasons is systemic illegal immigration. Employers prefer to hire illegal immigrants over American citizens because they're pliable, they'll do menial jobs for very low wages, they prefer them.
But I talk to employers all over the country, and they say we cannot find people to do the jobs we need to have done. That's not true?
Employers are constantly crying that they have a labor shortage. Why? Because employers like the labor market dynamics of hiring illegal labor.
I'd put Stein's argument to Carola Bracco of Neighbors Link.
Isn't there a good argument that undocumented immigrants drive down wages?
Wage theft is actually the big issue as it relates to undocumented immigrants.
But regardless, she says,
if there weren't undocumented immigrants doing this work, employers wouldn't be able to find anybody to do that work.
And if you deported them,
you would find a significant reduction in our economy. What we've basically done is created a second-class citizen that is ripe for abuse and exploitation. I think we need to rectify that issue and bring in immigration reform.
Reform that would legalize the undocumented, that is. But to Dan Stein, that would
justify law breaking and illegality. Employers have an obligation, like everyone else, to respect the law. It's a cornerstone of citizenship.
The kind of citizenship to which Trump National's former banquet chef aspires. But he did break the law, which raised a final question.
How come you feel comfortable talking to me like this?
I'm not 100% comfortable, but somebody's got to say something. And hopefully Mr. Biden saw this interview and give us a chance. Why not? I guess that's the whole reason, to show every single American that we're not a bad people. We try to be good. And thanks to this country, I think we do.
Outrage over a reported plan to give cold, hard cash to illegal border crossers. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Biden administration is in talks to pay up to $1 billion to illegal immigrant families separated at the border under former President Trump's zero tolerance policy, with each person set to get a payout of up to $450,000. Republicans say that plan cannot move forward.
First, you break the law, you get amnesty with Democrats. Now they're going to pay you for breaking the law. I mean, you think we have a problem in a caravan coming towards the border now and what we've seen over the last several months. Wait until the word gets out that you actually get paid for breaking the law to come into our country.
This incomprehensibly stupid idea of passing out up to $500,000 to people whose first act in this country was a violation of our law makes no sense at all.
That is going to be a slap in the face to every hardworking American who works hard and plays by the rules, and it'll especially be a slap in the face to people that have immigrated legally to this country.
Congressman Dan Crenshaw tweeting, for perspective, if a service member is killed in action, their next of kin gets an insurance payment of $400,000. Let that sink in. And dozens of House Republicans just sent a letter to 3 cabinet secretaries behind the reported plan demanding answers. Jesse, I'm guessing, because you brought this up yesterday, we weren't sure if it was the Babylon Bee or if it was real.
Yeah.
It's real, it sounds like.
Biden's border policy is written by the Babylon Bee. He pays you to break the law, and then he bails you out, remember, if you break the law. And didn't he also stop building the border wall and then build the border wall around his own house? Mm-hmm. And then he put the kids in cages, the same cages that he got mad at Trump for putting people in. Those happened to be the same cages he built when he was the VP. And so I think he spies on your bank account if you haven't broken the law. And then he puts $500,000 in your bank account for breaking the law. And then he fires you from work and then pays you not to work. And then he flies illegals into New York in the dead of night and says it's actually not the dead of the night. It's actually early in the morning. Oh, my God. This guy's already shattered the all-time American record for illegal entries, and then he blamed Trump for that. Now, there was a reason we all remember why we had to separate families, because Donald Trump was following the letter of the law. You cannot hold adults and minors in the same facility legally, and you can't hold minors for more than 21 days. Plus, you had to separate them to see if they were actually parents or if these were kids just getting trafficked, and it did have a very strong deterrent effect. Do you remember when there was a guy who came into the country, I think it was like 11 times illegally, and then murdered an American woman in a sanctuary city, Kate Steinle? She sued San Francisco and the federal government for damages.
Her family.
And the federal government wouldn't pay her. Mm-hmm. They said no, but they're going to pay an illegal to come over here. We've been separated from our families. We were told we couldn't see our grandparents. We couldn't see our parents. Right. We couldn't visit them in a nursing home. We couldn't say goodbye to them on their deathbeds. Couldn't hold a funeral. Couldn't go see them in church. What did we get? A check for $2,000? And these people come in here and they get $500,000? This is crazy. This is crazy.
And now it's time for a commercial break. No, I'm just kidding. Jessica, this is going to be really tough messaging if the administration stands by this.
I'm just putting it out there. I do not want this to be the lead message for the midterm elections. I would much rather
not a successful one.
No, definitely not. We'll see if it comes to pass. A lot of these things are proposals that exist, and they never actually come to fruition, and everybody gets hot and bothered about it, as we just heard, and then nothing happens. But it is important just to say that we had, 5,000 sets of parents or guardians, whoever, whether they were actually related to these kids or not, separated from them. And there are still 1,000 kids that we have not reunited them with their families. And that's something that sparked outrage on both sides of the aisle. No one wants that situation. And I believe there are 940 plaintiffs in total for these suits. And the ACLU, that's part of the lawsuit, has made it clear that it's only going to be a minority of the 940 that would even get any kind of settlement. Now, I'm not saying that I think that it's smart to go ahead with this, even particularly at this moment where we're exceptionally vulnerable anyway, but this isn't like thousands and thousands of people getting a $500,000 check.
Well, it's reparations.
Well, okay, but
a lot of people don't think reparations are bad things.
It's not reparations.
But
reparations.
Wait, we've been told that the border is closed, but there will be those who argue this is going to be further incentive, because in these cases where they say there's a parent and a child, that's now up to close to $1 million per family. I mean, this is a very dangerous journey these people embark on. It's almost like we're putting them in like the most dangerous game show ever.
Mm-hmm. Who are you talking to?
People.
Oh.
You? Greg Jr.? Bad Greg?
I couldn't get
Who wants to answer? Do you want him to answer?
It's Halloween and I couldn't get a sitter.
All
right, so here's the deal. The whole key is, sorry, guy.
You cannot allow this to be framed as Democrat versus Republican. You cannot allow this to be framed as an immigration question, and you cannot let this be framed about separation. This has nothing to do at all with immigration. So you don't want to get dragged down that hole. This is about draining the power of America, which is because this is so far left. There's a reason behind this. If illegals get $500,000 per illegal, we are done. Because that means they can keep doing this, and this is how you drain a country. You're basically opening up the drain. You're turning on the faucet, everything goes out. So the only solution is for us, Americans, to sue the government. We have to start suing the government over the perceived mistreatment of a Democratic White House. Or let's talk about the Afghanistan debacle. Surely there could be lawsuits over that. Let's talk about the response to the riots, right? We can sue the Democrat cities. How about inflation? How about the separation that you brought up? There are people who lost their loved ones who weren't them on the last moments. Yeah, they were there with the last moment. That is way worse than any of this crap. And this is crap because a lot of people were separated for the children's own good. And we can't forget that. But this is a bigger story about dismantling America. This is not about immigration, because this is the craziest idea. It goes beyond that. I thought it was a joke. You were tweeting yesterday. You were reading it off Twitter, and I'm going, that can't be right. This sounds like something that you would get on a far right website that you would have to check 100 times to see if it's true.
This is like ad libs for liberalism. How bad
Wall
could
Street
you get
Journal.
it?
So, Katie, are we incentivizing something that's incredibly dangerous for these people? Because what is the message then? Why wouldn't you? If you were in a desperate situation, whether it's economic or whatever persecution situation that you have coming here, why wouldn't you if you hear about this? Because already, all of our reporters who are down there talking to these caravans, the people say, we're coming because Joe Biden told us to come. That's their misperception of what's going on.
You're incentivizing an already multi-billion-dollar criminal cartel industry. And the Biden administration has done this on multiple levels, flying kids in the middle of the night to whoever they say are their relatives in the United States. They have no interest. They've taken away every single tool we have to disincentivize, as a disincentive not to break the law to come here illegally. And it's because Joe Biden said on the campaign trail that we can absorb 2 million new people a year. We're almost to that number now. They believe in this. But on the issue of the separation and paying people, families who were separated, the first thing I would say is it's a reflection of how the left feels about the American citizen, right? So if you're an American citizen and you commit a crime, you were separated from your family, and sometimes for a very long time, and sometimes they put you in prison. There is no money for that, and there shouldn't be, but this idea that people who break immigration law, come into the country illegally, breaking federal law, get a huge check of $450,000 to do so, nobody else gets to do that if you're a citizen. The other thing is there are tens of thousands of unaccompanied minors who are voluntarily separated from their parents in El Salvador, in Guatemala, and they were sent alone on this journey, and they were already separated. And so this is just, it's a way to, as Greg said, drain the system, but it's also a reflection of the disdain that the left has for the American taxpayer and how they think that you should be paying for rule breakers, not just inside the United States, but coming into the country as well.
How do illegals have standing to sue and reap all these damages? They don't have standing.
Well, it is their right. Legally, they are allowed to seek asylum here. That is part of our system.
Well, and so if they say,
but how do they have standing to sue for damages if they're not even citizens?
But if they say that they're here and they're being held against their will in a situation that is less than ideal, they're going to be able to sue over conditions. And they have a number of lawyers who have organized on their behalf.
So Gitmo detainees can sue.
Well, they've been convicted, and a lot of them waiting.
They're waiting.
Not all of them.
But they have sued.
There's no justification for
we
this.
haven't paid.
And wait, but
Pepsi's going to pay Gitmo.
They did not.
All right.
They did not fight their way into getting to Gitmo. You know what I'm saying?
Well, they fought their way up.
Totally irrelevant.
Western Hemisphere.
This is not about separation. This is about something completely different.
We interrupt this program. This is a national emergency. Important instructions will follow.